I pursued the Grand Tutor for 5 years, but during the women's official examination, he judged my cousin the winner. I never mentioned that my grandfather had long ago decided, if I failed to become a woman official, I would have to enter the palace. Later, the Grand Tutor submitted 13 memorials in succession, confessing to his own injustice in grading the examination. Hello everyone, welcome to Empress Revenge Stories. Next, let's begin this story. I had pursued Xinjiang for 5 years. On the day of the women's official examination, he judged my cousin the winner, citing an ink smudge on my paper. Looking at that pinpoint-sized ink smudge, my uncle's family mocked me mercilessly. The Grand Tutor thinks no more of you than this. My cousin gloated. It seems I have won the Grand Tutor's heart after all. With just a few tears, she couldn't bear to let me lose. I couldn't believe it. I turned to Xinjiang for confirmation. He was engrossed in reviewing the exam papers, not even lifting his head. His tone was dismissive. It's time you learned your lesson. Change your careless, arrogant ways. Heartbroken, I had a huge argument with him and announced that we were through. Xinjiang did not know that my grandfather had long ago decided, if I failed to become a woman official, I would have to enter the palace to serve His Majesty, who was said to have a preference for men. Later, I heard that the Grand Tutor, the same man who could face a mountain's collapse without changing expression, submitted 13 memorials in succession, confessing to his own injustice in grading the examination. By the time the Grand Tutor finished organizing the exam papers in the Great Hall, all the noble ladies who had participated in the selection had already dispersed. He raised his head, his expression calm and cool, with a trace of condescension. The court values not only talent and learning, but also moral character. You are arrogant and careless, sloppy in your writing, and you soiled your paper. Your loss is not unjust. I looked at him, waves of fury and grievance washing over me, my voice trembling. You criticize me constantly on ordinary days, and I tolerate it. But today is the women's official examination. Do you have any idea how important this is to me? So what? He sat upright, his tone indifferent as he cut me off. It's time you learned your lesson. Change your careless, arrogant ways. I stopped breathing for a moment, my eyes reddening. I had never encountered anything more absurd. All of this, just to teach me a lesson. Xinjiang's tone did not change. He said, exactly. Otherwise, with your flighty nature, how could you possibly be a women official? I clutched the jade name plaque hanging at my waist, the symbol of my hopes of escaping my family's control. Now those hopes were shattered, and the irony was unbearable. I ripped it off and hurled it at Xinjiang. Fine. Since you, Grand Tutor, think so little of me, from this day forward, I, Du Qingheng, will no longer trouble your eyes. The plaque slid off his robes and shattered on the ground. Xinjiang looked at me expressionlessly, his gaze lingering for a moment on my reddened eyes before he looked away. I walked out of the great hall, my body barely holding itself together. Our family carriage was still waiting outside. Due gloated over my disheveled state. How useless you are, sister. You chased after the Grand Tutor for years, yet he never showed you any favor. It seems I have won the Grand Tutor's heart after all. With just a few tears, she couldn't bear to let me lose. I smiled bitterly, unable to defend myself. My uncle, having just left the court, was eager to mock my father. His expression was smug. The Grand Tutor thinks no more of Qingheng than this. What a pity for our Du family's legitimate daughter, wasting 5 years of her life on him. The officials and noble ladies who had not yet dispersed looked over, unable to resist whispering among themselves. I was humiliated, stripped of all dignity, paraded like a plaything. My father, ashamed of me, had already walked away with his face covered. Xinjiang passed by and naturally heard these words as well. He did not spare me a single glance. He simply bowed slightly to my uncle and walked away as if nothing had happened. My cousin's mocking laughter pierced my heart. I finally understood. Xinjiang was an eternal block of ice. No matter how much I tried, I could never warm him. Fine, then. Now that Yue has become a women official, Qingheng will enter the palace. My grandfather's stern voice rang through the hall. This was agreed upon long ago. Whichever of you 2 cousins failed the examination would enter the palace to serve His Majesty. After everyone had left, only my immediate family remained in the room. My mother wept, holding me in her arms. I will never let my daughter go to that hellish place. Everyone knows His Majesty has a preference for men, that he shuns women. If Qingheng enters the palace, what hope does she have for the rest of her life? Are they trying to kill her? My father's face was cold. He lashed out in frustration. Who is to blame but this unfilial, useless daughter? She writes excellent policy essays on ordinary days, but at the critical moment, she can't even beat that ignorant girl from the second branch. My mother, furious, retorted, that girl's intentions were malicious. Who knows what methods she used to win? No, I am going to see the Grand Tutor and demand a re-evaluation of the papers. I stopped my mother, forcing a smile that was uglier than tears. Don't bother. Xinjiang said I was arrogant and careless. Because of an ink smudge the size of a pinhole, he failed my essay. By the end, I could not help but let my tears show. He deliberately made me lose to do away. Xinjiang came from a family of respected scholars. He was handsome, talented, and had won the top scholar title before even reaching adulthood. That year, when the top 3 scholars paraded through the streets, the sachets and handkerchiefs thrown by the young ladies nearly buried them. No one could resist such a brilliant, stunning young man. I was no exception. I wanted to be worthy of him, to stand by his side forever. So I tempered my nature and buried myself in books. Later, when the emperor permitted the selection of women officials, I was even more grateful that I had studied for so long, that I had such an opportunity. After comforting my mother, I dragged my weary body back to my room. Sitting before my vanity, I burned the embroidered pouches and handwritten poetry anthologies I had made for Xinjiang over the years. The firelight illuminated my pale face, burning away the foolishness of 5 years. From that day on, I changed. I was no longer my lively, talkative self. I became completely silent. I could even focus on learning court etiquette from the instructress. My grandfather was pleased with this change, and often reminded me privately to win His Majesty's favor, to speak for the family, and to try to get the men's official positions elevated. How absurd. Men's futures were to depend on a woman's connections. They underestimated me. If I entered the palace, I would never support this decaying marquis's household. But though I sneered inside, I never contradicted them openly. One day, my grandfather summoned me to his study. On the way, I ran straight into Xinjiang, whom I had not seen for over a month. There was no avoiding him. I curtsied, my movements precise and elegant, exactly as the instructress had taught. Xinjiang was momentarily startled. His expression softened. Qingheng. I choked up a little. In the past 5 years, he had rarely called my name with such intimacy. Now he said it so naturally, no longer spouting lectures about propriety and shame. I replied, my tone flat, you should address me as Miss Du, Grand Tutor. There was still resentment in my heart. I did not want to see him. Xinjiang let out a light laugh. He looked like a refined gentleman, as clear and bright as the moon. It is good that you know proper etiquette, but there is no need for such formalities with me. After I finish the women's examination matters, I will ask my mother to come and propose marriage. I stared at him in disbelief, wanting to laugh bitterly. Propose? You treated me coldly, failed my essay, cost me the position of women official, and now you claim to care for me. He stepped closer. I instinctively retreated, earning another soft laugh. It was a laugh as cold as the early spring wind. I heard him say, if you don't smooth out your temperament, how can you be the mistress of the Xin household? My mother had noticed the changes in me over the past few days. Seeing me grow more silent each day, she used the excuse of buying a trousseau to get my grandfather's permission for me to go out. She also arranged for my cousin to accompany me. Though I had indeed grown tired of being confined to the house, I had little desire to go anywhere, even outside. I did not know what to enjoy. My cousin treated me like a younger sister, knowing what I had been through. He felt great concern for me. He and my uncle had come to persuade my grandfather not to send me into the palace. But my grandfather, obsessed with wealth and status, had already submitted the memorial the day after the examination results were announced. It was too late. My mother's family had always been good to me. Upon receiving her letter, my cousin tried every way to cheer me up. Qingheng, let's go to the bookstore and buy some interesting puzzle books. You used to love those, didn't you? Even after you enter the palace. If you get bored, you can read them for amusement. He watched me carefully, and when I finally smiled, he sighed in relief. Don't worry. I will do my best in my official career and be your support. I was stunned. My mother's family had always treated me well. My cousin and I had been very close. But once, when Xinjiang saw me shopping with my cousin, his expression turned cold. Though he said nothing at the time, he later scolded me harshly. Men and women should not have intimate contact. You are about to come of age. If you do not observe proper boundaries, you will not only ruin your own marriage prospects but also slander your reputation as a wanton woman. His words were unbearably harsh, but I was used to obeying Xinjiang, and I was truly afraid, as he said, of harming my cousin's prospects. So I really had grown distant. Now, thinking back, my cousin and I had never behaved inappropriately. What was there to criticize? Xinjiang was not necessarily right. I smiled and picked up a few puzzle books. Then I heard someone call, "Sister." I looked up. Du Wei was standing with Xinjiang, both holding books. Her pink dress complemented his black official robe. They looked well matched. Xinjiang's gaze fell heavily on me and my cousin, his hand tightening on the books he held. Du Wei glanced at us, her eyes darting. She then smiled innocently. What a coincidence. Running into my sister and cousin Chen here. It seems I am intruding. I did not know what to say. Xinjiang took her hand and handed her the books. Weren't you looking for some poetry anthologies? These are excellent. Du Wei's cheeks flushed as she accepted them. Her pale hand touched the hem of his cloud-embroidered robes. I also need some calligraphy copybooks. Grand Tutor, could I borrow some of your specimens to study? Xinjiang grunted in assent and led her away. They climbed into a carriage and disappeared around the corner. I shook my head and laughed. Mocking my former self, I had venerated Xinjiang for years, yet never received his careful guidance. With a few coy words, Du Wei had already softened his heart. It was just as well. My heart was dead. When I returned home that evening, my mother said Du Wei had brought Xinjiang back with her. My grandfather had invited him to dinner and a few drinks. My mother was furious. I thought he was cold by nature. Now I see he's just blind. Bewitched by that worthless creature. I comforted my mother, though I was also a little surprised. Had he really become so attentive? On the way back to my quarters, I passed the garden. Xinjiang was standing by the rockery, watching me, as if he had been waiting a long time. Du Qingheng, have you nothing to say to me? Say what? I asked. In the past, when I liked him, I would chatter endlessly about even the smallest things. But now I was tired. I had no desire to share anything with him. And what was there to say? That the Marquis's house was in decline. That my grandfather, blinded by power and status, favored my uncle whose official position was higher than my father's. So I had to rely on the women's examination for an opportunity. Or that because of his partiality, I had lost that opportunity, and was now cast aside by my family, to be sent into the palace to win the unpredictable favor of an unpredictable emperor. Seeing I was silent, his tone grew cold. Today, you behaved intimately with a man outside the family. You read those vulgar, worthless books. You have no resemblance to a proper young lady. His lecture was utterly absurd. My cousin and I had not been improper. Meanwhile, he had been the one fawning over Du Wei, the pot calling the kettle black. I had never realized how self-righteous and hypocritical he was. I could not be bothered. I smiled dryly. You are right, Grand Tutor. I will go rest now. Please excuse me. He nodded approvingly and began to say something else, but a servant called him to dinner. I curtsied hastily and walked away without looking back. Xinjiang ate distractedly. Du Qingheng's quiet obedience unsettled him. Fortunately, he had convinced his mother to propose marriage, and today he had come to give the Marquis a heads up. The old Marquis had long wanted to get close to Xinjiang. Seeing that the usually aloof Grand Tutor was being so polite, he drank a few extra cups. By the time he was flushed, he could barely understand what Xinjiang was saying, only catching the words, propose, and marry. Assuming Xinjiang was referring to Du Wei, since Xinjiang had brought her home, he eagerly agreed without further question. After the feast, Xinjiang returned home in a drunken haze, unable to sleep. Though he had reached an agreement with the old Marquis, he felt a lingering unease. Du Qingheng had changed exactly as he had wanted, yet he felt no joy. He told himself he was simply not yet accustomed to her quietness. He smiled and resolved to propose as soon as possible. The next morning, the Marquis announced to everyone that Xinjiang intended to marry Duowei. My uncle's family was overjoyed. Duowei reddened with happy tears. Yuewei has also long admired Grand Tutor Shen. I clenched my fingers unconsciously. Silently, I listened to my grandfather's warnings. Whatever feelings you once had for the Grand Tutor, he is soon to marry your younger sister. You are about to enter the palace. Stay away from him. If you cause any trouble, ruining your sister's marriage, don't blame me for being ruthless. I ignored Duoei's smug look and smiled indifferently. Grandfather speaks truly. Qingheng will keep her distance from the Grand Tutor. As I finished speaking, a servant announced that Madame Xin and Xinjiang had arrived to propose. Duowei jumped up excitedly, supporting her grandfather as she went to greet them, her face demure. I followed, keeping my head down and trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. But after the two families exchanged betrothal papers, Xinjiang smiled and walked towards me. Qingheng, shall we set the wedding for early autumn? That way, you won't be too warm in your wedding dress. The room went cold. My grandfather was shocked. His teacup slipped from his hand and crashed to the floor. You want to marry Qingheng? Xinjiang looked at me with a smile. Yes. Qingheng and I have a long-standing affection. Who else would I marry? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Duoei's eyes reddened for real now? The joyful atmosphere was gone. Only my mother's soft sighs remained. Madame Xin opened the betrothal papers thoughtfully. Seeing the name, Duoei, on them, she forced a smile. Old Marquis, you seem to have given us the wrong papers. Fortunately, we caught the mistake. Please quickly bring the legitimate daughter's papers so we can complete this match. At this, my grandfather averted his eyes. My uncle fumed with shame, and Duoei's makeup was ruined by her tears. No one spoke. The scene was farcical. I could not help but laugh. But I am not marrying Grand Tutor Shen, so how could I produce a betrothal paper? Xinjiang snatched the paper, and when he saw the name, he threw it away as if it were a hot potato. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. The meaning? My mother retorted with a cold laugh. Why don't you tell us, Grand Tutor Shen? If you had not favored Duowei and judged unfairly, Qingheng would not have lost. And having lost the women's examination, she is to be sent into the palace to serve His Majesty by her grandfather. My poor daughter, her sincere heart trampled, now sentenced to that hellish place. I do not know when I will see her again. Xinjiang's face went pale. He looked anguished. Qingheng, why did you not tell me? I supported my mother and smiled at him, my expression ironic. Didn't you say, Grand Tutor, that I needed to learn my lesson, to change my careless, arrogant ways? Now I have changed. I am sure His Majesty will appreciate this obedient side of me. Xinjiang's eyes reddened instantly. I did not know of your difficult situation. I thought you were too sharp-tongued at the academy, too proud. That temper would not have suited you as the mistress of the Shen household. I only meant to temper your edge. And Duowei lied to me, saying that if she failed, her family would send her as a concubine to an old prince, which would be worse than death. So I laughed mockingly. How generous of you, Grand Tutor, to sympathize with your dear cousin. You were willing to let the one you truly care about fail, just to help her. And now, good deeds are rewarded. She is devoted to you. Why not marry her? Satisfied to see him frozen in place, I gestured behind him. I heard that you could not bear to let cousin Yuewei fail, all because of a few tears. Well, now she is shedding more than a few tears. Shouldn't you go comfort her? Xinjiang's eyes swirled with emotion. He looked wounded. Why do you say such things to hurt me? If she were not your cousin, I would not even look at her. She seemed deeply attached to me now. I had pursued her for 5 years, and she had remained cold. Now that I was forced into the palace, she wanted no one but me. How absurd. I avoided his reaching hand. My expression was cold, my voice thick with disgust. Grand Tutor, do not come so close. My grandfather said I must keep my distance from you, or he will punish me. My grandfather approached, trying to apologize with a sycophantic smile. I did not want to watch this farce any longer. I grabbed my mother's hand and left. Later, I heard from the gatekeeper that Xinjiang and his mother had left, their faces grim. My grandfather had seen them off politely, but as soon as they were gone, he slapped Duo's face so hard it swelled. Wretch! If it were not for your scheming, Xinjiang would be my son-in-law. Now that you have cost him Qingheng, do you think he will let you off? By tomorrow, your reputation will be ruined throughout the capital, and the whole household will suffer for it. Sure enough, the next morning, the capital buzzed with rumors. The Grand Tutor Shen, who could face a mountain's collapse without changing expression, had submitted an emergency memorial admitting to a mistake in his grading. He asserted that the second daughter of the Du family, Du Yue, was unworthy of the position of women official due to her lack of talent and virtue, and requested a re-examination. Du Yue's name was on everyone's lips, and she was universally despised. Du Yue was so ashamed she wanted to die. My uncle feigned illness to avoid court, and even my cousin from the same mother was mocked at the academy and forced to take leave. The gossip raged, but the emperor at that time issued another decree, sending Xinjiang to Jiangzhou to investigate a case of examination fraud. As the date of his departure neared, so did the date of my entry into the palace. Xinjiang's eyes were red. He submitted 13 memorials in succession, all of which were ignored. I knew what he was thinking. If I held an official position, I would not have to enter the palace. But he had miscalculated. When I accepted the marked policy essay from the instructress, I knew the emperor would not allow it before I entered the palace. The day after Xinjiang left for Jiangzhou, the emperor summoned me. The new emperor, Wei Xiao, had been on the throne for less than a year. He was rumored to be bloodthirsty, violent, and uninterested in women. Yet here he sat on the stone steps before me, completely lacking in ceremony, looking like a rogue. He took the policy essay from my hands and raised an eyebrow. I heard that on the day of the women's examination, one essay was particularly insightful but was failed because of an ink smudge the size of a pinhole. He glanced through it. This essay should not have been failed. But the next day, your grandfather submitted a memorial offering to send you into the palace to serve me. I looked down at the ground and said nothing. Wei Xiao smiled and continued. The nobles and powerful families in the capital are mostly lazy and corrupt, but they are deeply interconnected. Like the rotted roots of a tree, the rot is old, and it makes it impossible for new growth to flourish. Do you want to dig out these rotten roots? I snapped my head up. Wei Xiao's gaze was intense. His tone was encouraging. With your talent, you should not be buried in the palace. In the past, you had no choice, but now, I can give you an opportunity. Join me in this work. Then you will no longer be So-and-so's daughter, but Minister Du, or even Prime Minister Du. His words were like a hurricane, clearing away the gloom in my heart and igniting a fire within. I knelt down, my head touching the ground. This subject obeys. Wei Xiao made me his imperial noble consort, the only consort in his palace. It seemed I enjoyed his deep favor. Everyone wanted to curry favor, and the Du family's fortunes rose. My father grew more confident at home, and my grandfather considered himself a member of the imperial family. I ignored all this, simply hosting flower viewing banquets regularly and inviting the noble families of the capital to attend. At each banquet, the guests would inevitably divide into two factions: the newly risen officials who had passed the imperial examinations, and the old aristocratic families with hereditary titles. Most of the wealth and resources of the realm were held by the latter. Inequality leads to unrest. If this continued, there would surely be a rebellion. The palace maids and eunuchs at the banquets were my eyes and ears. From the ladies' conversations, they gleaned information, and from the divisions among them, they deduced the political allegiances of their male relatives. I then organized this intelligence and reported it to Wei Xiao. But this method, though effective, was slow. Wei Xiao looked up from a pile of memorials and smiled at me. Since ancient times, no political reform has been accomplished overnight. How fast do you want it to be? I looked away, a little embarrassed. In the days I had spent with Wei Xiao, I had learned that he was not the cruel tyrant of rumor. He was just a bit direct. As for the rumors about his preference for men, there was some evidence. The young general who had fought alongside him on the battlefield, there was indeed something between them. At that moment, Wei Xiao was bent over his desk, and Lin Feng stood staring at him, holding his sword. Weapons were not usually allowed in the palace, but Wei Xiao had given Lin Feng many privileges. The young general was cold and fierce. But the young emperor was a brilliant strategist. They really were like a couple out of a story. I was lost in thought, planning to ask my mother's sister to send me some more storybooks via my cousin, Wei Xiao. Seeing my distracted gaze, threw a memorial at me. "What are you thinking? You're smiling strangely." Startled, I glared at him. He laughed. "You've stopped pretending. I see. You've grown quite bold." I bowed perfunctorily and smiled thinly. "Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty." Oddly enough, after our initial awkwardness, I was not afraid of Wei Xiao. I trusted him implicitly. When Xinjiang returned from Jiangzhou 2 months later, he brought news that shook the court. More than 80 officials had been involved in examination fraud. Many were high-ranking ministers. Wei Xiao sat alone for a long time after receiving the information. The sky grew dark. I could only see his silhouette. I carried a candle over and glanced inadvertently at the list. A familiar name made my face go pale. Wei Xiao's gaze was dark. His tone was unreadable. "What do you think I should do? The examinations are the foundation of the state. If I do not punish this severely, it will not be a sufficient deterrent." I thought you would plead for him. I closed my eyes and touched my head to the ground. "I ask only that Your Majesty not implicate my uncle and aunt." My heart ached as if bleeding. I had never imagined that my cousin's hard work in his official career meant colluding with others to control the examinations. If the court was forever controlled by the powerful clans, what hope was there for the common scholars? The state would be in danger. After that day, I fell ill. The imperial physician said it was an acute emotional disturbance. He gave me medicine and told me to rest. Many people came to visit. Wei Xiao came several times, but I refused to see him, saying I was afraid of passing on my sickness. In truth, I was ashamed. I had talked about reforming the court with him, yet I could not control even those closest to me. Perhaps because I looked so terrible. There were rumors that I was near death. My grandfather grew anxious and requested an audience. I wanted to get information from him, so I allowed them in, but he brought Du away, hinting that I might be dying and that the imperial favor might be lost. So he wanted to send another girl in. Du away, a fool, abandoned her pretense of meekness and offered me tea, calling me imperial noble consort sister. When Wei Xiao walked in, her eyes practically stuck to him. I was almost speechless. I took a sip of tea and coughed several times. "Since when does the imperial noble consort make the decisions in the palace?" my grandfather stammered, kneeling on the ground. Wei Xiao helped him up with a smile, then immediately ordered eunuchs to take them out and beat them. "The imperial noble consort can indeed make decisions for me, but this granddaughter of yours is too ugly. She hurts my eyes." I pulled my blanket over my head. Another group of bizarre relatives, making me lose even more face. Wei Xiao pulled the blanket down. "People chase after fame and fortune. It is normal. Today, it is someone close to you. Tomorrow, it might be someone close to me. What you need to do is try your best to correct the situation. Why wallow in shame and waste time?" I felt he was right. I struggled out of bed. Why punish myself for someone else's mistakes? At the end of the month, when Xinjiang returned with all the evidence, Wei Xiao and I had already determined the situation with most of the officials. As he had noted, the connections were complicated. Most of the corrupt officials were not even doing it for their own sons. They were just entangled in a net they could not escape. But disturb one and the whole thing moves. It was impossible to punish half the court at once. Therefore, Wei Xiao leaked some ambiguous evidence, making them suspect each other. Everyone wanted to be the sole keeper of the truth. They were eager to destroy each other. After a few ministers were imprisoned on other charges, the rest began to worry. They began to scheme in secret. We needed an opportunity to catch them all. So another flower viewing banquet was held. It was more magnificent than ever. Not only the noble ladies, but also the male officials were invited. Xinjiang was also on the guest list. It had been almost 6 months since I had last seen him. He had lost a lot of weight, as if he had been seriously ill. His official robes hung loosely on him. Seeing me watching Xinjiang, Wei Xiao's hand tightened on his wine cup. His eyes held an emotion I could not name. "I heard that you once pursued Grand Tutorship for many years." I looked away, lowering my eyes. That was all in the past. Xinjiang. Wei Xiao set down his cup and tapped the table. "Appears cold, but is actually very proud. Pursuing someone like that is exhausting." Bringing up the past no longer stirred any emotion in me. I had only been looking at Xinjiang because I was curious how he had lost so much weight. If he had looked like that when he first rode through the streets, he would not have inspired so much longing in the young ladies of the capital. Does your Majesty have time to gossip today? Wei Xiao was silenced. I was pleased to see him stymied. Halfway through the banquet, I excused myself to change and was returning to the main hall when Xinjiang stopped me in the corridor. Qingheng, I regret it. My expression was cold, my tone emotionless. You overstep, Grand Tutor Shen. He stared at me for a long time. A tear rolled down his cheek. I know your nature. You will not be content in the palace. If you are willing, I will use my achievement in solving this case to ask His Majesty to set you free. Please, Qingheng, give me another chance. Let me make it up to you. I watched him calmly. Xinjiang, do you really know me? You say you care for me, but you have never understood what I want. I fought to become a women official to escape the mire of the Marquis' household, not to marry you, but you easily destroyed all my efforts. And now, you assume I do not want to stay in the palace, so you want to take me away. Xinjiang, I am a living person, not an object you can mold to your liking. Xinjiang's lips trembled. He looked pitiful. No, that's not it. I only wanted you to be better. I never meant to hurt you. I looked at him silently. Your well-intentioned opinions have caused me nothing but suffering. If you truly want what is best for me, do not bother me again. When I do not see you, I am much happier. Halfway through the banquet, my nerves finally gave out. Wei Xiao patted my hand. Let a palace maid take you back to rest. I shook my head. I have worked so long and so hard. I cannot ruin it at the last moment. Just as I decided to drink a strong cup of tea to refresh myself, chaos erupted. Assassins in black appeared, striking with deadly force. They were clearly suicidal, attempting to lure out a snake. The Great Hall was not guarded, and the Imperial Guards were overwhelmed. Lin Feng quickly came with reinforcements, but he was a moment too slow. A dart flew straight at me, too fast for me to dodge. I thought I was about to die. Then a figure jumped in front of me and took the dart. Wei Xiao's bright yellow robes were stained with blood. I held him up, panicking. Imperial physician. Quickly, call the Imperial physician. The hall was in chaos. All the conspirators were taken to the dungeons. I stood by his bed as he drank his medicine and lay down weakly. Your Majesty only scraped his skin. Was that really necessary? I stopped, meeting Wei Xiao's accusatory gaze. Fortunately, the dart was not poisoned and Wei Xiao was wearing his inner armor. It was a false alarm. Ungrateful girl. Who do you think I did that for? I fell silent. Your Majesty saved my life. This subject has nothing to offer in return but her own person. Wei Xiao's ears turned bright red. He looked away, refusing to see me. Even I, with my thick nerves, could see he cared for me. My first reaction was not embarrassment, but surprise. You like women. But what about General Lin? Wei Xiao threw a pillow at me, chasing me out of his chambers. Well, a general's duty is to protect. How could he protect if he was not always watching His Majesty? All the implicated officials were taken to the dungeons. The main conspirators were executed and their families destroyed. The rest were stripped of their titles and property and banned from the examinations for 3 generations. Outsiders thought the emperor was merciful, but for those accustomed to power, watching helplessly as their families fell was worse than death. They and their descendants would not even have the opportunities of poor scholars. They would be forced to sell their labor to survive. And so, the examination fraud case was finally resolved. The old noble families were broken, and those that remained were no longer a threat. Fortunately, my grandfather was too incompetent for anyone to care about, so he was not implicated. But with no one to support the family's status, the Marquis' household gradually declined. Wei Xiao rewarded me, allowing me to register as an independent household and giving me a mansion and property. He himself gained the loyalty of the people and seized a fortune, making him the real winner. Xinjiang's 13 memorials also resulted in the re-establishment of the women's examination. After overseeing that selection, he submitted his resignation. I heard he was consumed by regret and his health was failing. Wei Xiao accepted his resignation. I did not pay attention. Because of that selection, my name was once again at the top of the list. From then on, I took my place at court as a woman. Beginning my own life, only at night. I have some troubles. Wei Xiao sneaks out of the palace and clings shamelessly to my bed. Hurry up and give me a crown prince. He says, I want to retire. Retire? What a strange thing to say. How can anyone not like their work? I still plan to be the first female prime minister. After hearing this story, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your feelings in the comments. I look forward to hearing your voice.